Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nagata from NPO Plus Arts. It's been a long time since I have last met Mr. Yamazaki, but I was looking forward to this opportunity. And as Mr. Yamazaki has just said, community design is one keyword. We are also engaged in a similar endeavor. Especially in disaster prevention, we are specializing our activities. We're focusing on disaster prevention. This may sound like a conclusion, but whenever we design the community or when we try to revitalize the community, we need three things: water, wind, and soil. I also give a presentation outside of Japan, and it seems to be understood. So I want to share the same concept with you today. And this is a very abridged, short version. I'm sorry I'm not a very good painter. There is a water type person, soil type person, and wind type person. Those are the people who would revitalize, re-energize the community. The soil type is the easy to understand one. It's somebody who does not move, who is stationary. Other people who live in one community. And in Japan, during the Edo era period or until the beginning of Showa period, we have had the soil type people who would have local festivals, and they have had a very rich community. And even though they were struck by a disaster, they can recover from such a disaster very quickly. But now that the society has changed and people are working in different locations and people only go home just to sleep, so there's less communication within the community. That is most evident in the big cities. And as a result of that, we are seeing destruction of communities. And in order to overcome this, what we need is a wind type of person. A wind type person would bring seeds to the community. When I say seeds, it's like activities, events, and programs and projects. By having that kind of a trigger into the community, people can begin to communicate with each other. Without that, it's very difficult for them to connect. So we would introduce various events to this communication. And being a wind, we have to go elsewhere to another location. And after the wind is gone, has passed, we cannot let the soil just dry up. The seed is there, the soil is there. Now we need an intermediary, somebody to water that soil. For the seed, we give the water, and it is to be nurtured. And eventually, that water type person will be gone also. We have this kind of person, like the local ladies or school teachers. Various kinds of people are doing that voluntarily. And I've seen such cases outside of Japan as well. And when we look at the water type of person, and in my case, I am the wind type, and I'm not familiar with the water type of person. They're very good at watering the community. At the beginning, they give lots of water until things take root. And once the plant starts to grow on its own, then if you give too much water, then it rots. So at one moment in time, they would give less care. There is some subtlety to that. And being a wind type person myself, what's crucial is to give good seeds. That's where I put all the effort into, to have a good seed. And what is a good seed? I think there are 2 points. Looking back on what we have done, those are the type of seeds that would take deep root. There are 2 keywords that I can cite to. One of them, it says here, it's actually better when we plan not perfectly. Imperfection, meaning we need room for improvement. That's the first point. And the second point is a methodology called plus creative, to add something attractive. And in a diagram, it would look like this. The center is brimming. This is the plus creative, something that would attract the attention, something beautiful, something enjoyable, moving, extraordinary, something out of the ordinary, something that is very creative and attractive. By having this, people would come to this event or to this project. And once you come here, you would meet the water ladies, and they would begin to create something together. By being engaged in a process like this, then the community can make the process their own. Something that has been not successful would be like a circus entertainment or like a local ampam show for the comic character show. They would come to their community and they would entertain, and people are there as just a simple audience. And once the show or the entertainment is over, then the people just leave. That's it. It's a one-time event. But by leaving some imperfectness, then people would have some more room to make improvements. So whether or not we have that kind of a room for improvement is very important. There will be some room for improvement. Still, it has to be attractive, so it's very difficult. It's very important to balance those two. And one of the good examples of such an event is Kaeru Caravan. This is a disaster prevention type of a project. And we've had a major earthquake 20 years ago in Hanshin, Awaji area. The damages were like this. More than 600,000 people were killed. And here the city center looks like this. The roads are damaged. The railways also, they're damaged. And the fire broke out. It was very early in the morning, 5:46. The whole house had collapsed, and people were pressured to death in that houses. And because the furnitures were not fixed, people were crushed by those furnitures and they died. And who were there to support those people? It was the community or the people in the community or the families. 95% of the people were rescued by either the family or the community. So what was understood is that it's very important to have good communication with the community. And if any major earthquake strikes in Tokyo, I was wondering how the Tokyo people would cooperate with each other. And so this program began in Kobe, and we began this in 10 years ago. That means 10 years after the Great Earthquake. And we began by conducting research, a very thorough research. What we have done is to interview the disaster victims. They know the best about what has happened and what is needed, and the knowledge that was most useful. We have interviewed those victims. I thought they are the kinds of information that's most useful, and we have compiled that information into this book, Earthquake Note for Always. This is the book that we have published. This is the content of this book. People have used the jacks of the vehicles to rescue people, or the tatami mat were used to transport, to bring people, injured people. We also give various sessions to adults, but also to children, the vulnerable, the kids, and the elderly, in order to communicate this to that generation. We have added some more elements like this together with interesting designs. We have made it more interesting. And what we're doing is the disaster prevention drills. And we have this frog character to make it more fun. Back then, we had about 20 students volunteer for this, and they had come up with interesting ideas. And they have chosen something that the kids would like. like a fire extinguisher, how to use it, and if you have just leave the jack as it is, it's not very interesting. But there is the frog who is crushed by the big earthquake eel. Or you would use the blankets in the homes to carry people instead of the stretchers because it was not available. By having this character or by using the techniques for origami for folding papers, we have made like small plates. And for small kids, we've introduced them some exercises through which they can learn how to protect themselves. We've also had puppet games and picture story shows. And there were also card games and board games that we have introduced. We have 5 types of such card games and board games to familiarize the kids with the disasters. And we have learned a lot from Laticon, who will be speaking to us later on. We have worked together in developing those games. And this is one example, the shuffle game. The process, there are 4 different cards and they represent 4 different processes, but it's not put in the right order. And the children, they have to think by themselves and put them in the correct order. And if they turn over the cards, they would find the correct answers. And if they get it right, they would get some points. They are all represented in illustrations, so it can be used in any country. It's very simple. And this is the case where I have spoken with 50 affected people from the Tohoku Great Earthquake. By having this animated figures, it makes it much easier for the children to understand what is happening. And here, in this case, the last dialogue is left blank. This is for the kids to think about. They would be thinking what needs to be spoken in this situation. And this is now available in Japanese, Thai, English, and in Spanish also. And I am working on this together with the Laticon in Thailand. And they also have this comic in Thai language as well. And within Japan, everything started in Kobe, and we're now in our 10th year. And we've held this project in 23 prefectures and over 250 times. And in all of these cases, we were invited to go. And in the first year, we would give them assistance, and from the second year onwards, they were left on themselves to do it themselves. And most of our job today is to rent out our equipments to those people who are interested in conducting such a training. And this is another example in Kyoto. And there's a fire engine here, and other people like PTAs and women's associations, not just the people for disaster prevention, but all kinds of people gather. It's like a festival around a disaster prevention. And in some cases, they have more than 100 staffs arranging it, and they sometimes have the execution committee to conduct this. And this is also expanded overseas into 16 countries, like JICA and the Japan Foundation. They are also recognizing this as one of the cultures, Japanese cultures, in preventing disasters. And within when we give aid overseas, we should not just provide them with the fish, but it's the know-how of fishing the fish that we should be teaching to the outside world. That is the gist of international cooperation, so that's what we are doing also. And what's most important is to start with research. Like in Southeastern Asian countries, they never keep records. They never look back, and they do not record things that has happened, even though they've had serious incident in the past. There are no records available. So what we do is to begin with the research, and then we give them a lecture, and then we try things out together. And from the second round onwards, they would do it on themselves, and they would rearrange it or modify it so that it would meet their own needs, demands. This is the case in Indonesia. In Guatemala also, The Guatemalans, we did this in Guatemala, and then the Guatemalan people went to 4 other countries around them, and in Mongol and Bhutan, and in Bhutan we spoke to the high school students, and the high school students, they were teaching the elementary school kids. And then in Turkey, this one has become a Kuma character, Kuma Caravan. It's not a Kaeru. Kaeru was the frog, and this has become a bear in the case of a turkey.
In Myanmar and Thailand and the Philippines and Chile, I'm going to visit Chile very soon. Chile is very seriously working on disaster prevention, and so these days there are good Chile people who are good at this kind of things. So, well, actually, we are inviting Latikon-san to many different seminars, and there's a both ways learning experience in Southeast Asia recently, for example. Now, this is very interesting. Localization. This is really expanding. As you know, the materials used are getting localized more and more by the people who live there, and they arrange things. For example, on the left side, you see the original frog character. Initially, we rented out, but it costs money. So eventually they start to create their own character. And always there are people who are good at creating these kind of things. And so all around the world, there are lots of, this frog has a lot of relatives all around the world. And sometimes some of them don't look that, kind. Some of them look kind of scary. But in any case, if you go to warm countries, there is no blanket. And so they use, in the case of the Philippines, banik, which is a kind of a grass sheet. And in Indonesia, they use sarung, which is the clothes they wrap around their, like a skirt for men. And so they use different types of cloths instead of a blanket to make stretcher. Now, here's a PTA member who was really good at do-it-yourself kind of stuff, so he created the materials. And this is also interesting. In Japan, we make temporary dishes with newspapers, but if you go to the Philippines and Indonesia and Thailand, not so many newspapers are kept at home. So in those countries, they would use, instead of newspaper, banana leaf, for example, because this traditional materials are available for them. So always local people try to incorporate what's available in Japan first, and then over the time, they are very quickly adapting things to suit the situation there. And these days, actually, the contents of the game changes. Maybe the first time is the only time when they use the original version. And starting in the second year, they start to arrange and localize the contents of the game. This is Thai version of the shuffle game. This is the Philippine version. So if you look into it, the folding method of the banana leaf dishes is different as in the case of newspaper. And the symbol character also gets localized. In Indonesia, they use this Bambi, and I don't know if this looks like a Bambi, but anyway, that's what they try to do. Now, what kind of assistance do we need to provide to them? Well, I have 2 examples. This is something that was created in the Philippines. Move Philippines, everything is localized. Everything was created by the local people. We just gave some support for them. And in 11 or so, there was a major typhoon called Typhoon Yondon. And so the local people created the disaster preventiveness card. And here, Latikon-san is there, and she was also there to work with us to tell people how to make games. And that's what they're making. And they, I think, spent 4 or 5 days together with us. And Latikon-san was really helpful. I mean, I also get involved in developing games, so there's no way that I can do as good as a job as her. And the local people are really creative, and they know lots of, and also Latiko-san is really knowledgeable about the game, so they can, she and her team can teach a lot of things to the people. Now, for the character, there is Tasha, the smallest monkey on the planet living in the Philippines. So they used this Tasha, and also they included this bigger brother of Tasha as a second character. And the local designer made these programs. And the character goods were even created. And this is the original game that was created only for 4 or 5 days, but they upgraded this to look nicely. And this doesn't exist in Japan. And maybe we're thinking to import this back to Japan, and then we can also translate this into Indonesian so that Indonesian people can take advantage of this. And this is a shuffle game. And instead of Kaeru or frog, monkey, they have this monkey character. They use this grass sheet, for example. And recently, I went to Nepal because the country was hit by a major earthquake in April. And starting next year, if the license is given, we was able to start these activities for next 3 years. And we're trying to work with the teachers there. And we look at the different sites to understand the impact of the disaster, and also we try to understand the logistics there and things available there. And we show the materials to the teachers there, and also we try to understand what has happened based on the interview that we have with local people for the preparation. And so the teachers will be, local teachers will be the main players of the activities. And on the left top, what you are seeing is the cartoon material you saw where the last balloon of dialogue was left empty, and the local teacher is drawing the pictures. What was striking in Nepal was that disaster prevention, if that is done wrong, can kill people. Because just before the disaster took place in April, and Red Cross taught people to get under the table when the shake starts. Now, it was in the afternoon of Saturday, and people are outside of the room, outside of the house, and there was a major earthquake. So what people did at the time was they tried to go in the building to get under the table, and it was when all the buildings start to collapse. So actually, if you go outside already, plaza, the square is the safest place. So if the disaster prevention education is done wrong, you can kill people. And here, this teacher is drawing a picture, a cartoon, to illustrate that story. So there are certain episodes uniquely appreciated by people, and they didn't know how to share that story with other people. And all the teachers were saying they wanted to understand how to escape. And one pattern which is available in Japan doesn't work. And so we have to put yourself in the shoes of the local people. And also it's important to teach those things in a way that people can understand. So they try to arrange the disaster prevention materials and the card materials, and we organized the workshops, and all the program itself was localized. And then we gathered together children and started the program. And these local people, local teachers, will have finished developing the program in the local schools and make a report before we go them once again in November. And what we're thinking is to make these, develop these teachers into a trainer so that these trainers can train other teachers. We want to create this mechanism. Now, this is the last information for you. This session is organized by Japan Foundation, Asian Center, and we're helping the Asian Center of Japan Foundation. And, you know, wind people like us are trying to make a good quality seeds, but these days, we really have to develop people because there's a limit to what we can do, because I was in the Philippines up to yesterday, and yet there are so much needs. People want us to help, but we can't do it all, so we have to develop people. So we have to create more, we have to develop more water people and wind people. So Asia Center's HANDS project is the project that was developed for that purpose. And as you can see in this picture, in Asia, I think it was up to 6 countries which were participating in this project last year, but Indonesia, Philippines, India, Nepal, Myanmar, and Japan. Malaysia, sorry. And now, so this year, 8 countries and 25 young people between 18 to 35 years old. And actually, getting selected for the participation is very, very tough because in Indonesia, you can select 5 out of 700. But then we try to gather together these 25 people and train them. And we will continue to hold this program for 7 years, every year. And then the idea is to develop these trainers for the future and connect them as a network. And so disaster preventiveness and creativity are joined together. And we are trying to develop people who can organize these kind of activities, which combines these 2 items. And so there will be 200 people being educated over 7 years. And at the end, we'll be able to develop the network of these, among these 200 people. And actually, this is happening already because when I carry out similar activities in those countries, those graduates will come back to participate in a workshop. And that's very important because the important thing is to get continuous stream of experience opportunities after you finish the course, because through practice you learn. And yesterday I was talking about this kind of things with the Filipino people. And so it's very important for those people to come back in workshops and get more and more committed. And through this kind of combination between existing programs and hands projects, we can ensure the continuous flow of the more experiences for them. Now, last year in September, we went to the Philippines for 5 days each, and in spring we went to Japan and also Nepal, Indonesia, I'm sorry. And last year we interviewed a lot of victims, and also we worked with the NPOs. We listened to what they've done in the past in disaster recovery. And then by getting information, we can brush up the programs. This is in the Philippines, in the Thailand, and in Japan. Plus Arts organized tours, and toward March next year we're organizing tours. Last year we visited a lot of disaster-stricken areas, and we learned wonderful activities happening there. And we're trying to develop a program to develop talents locally in the spring tour next year. In Indonesia, those graduates of the training programs are getting the workshop to teach local medical students, so that medical students can learn, and also the workshop graduates can practice the knowledge they've obtained. Now, as for action plan, I forget to say, in the first year that's training, but at the end they are to develop the action plan, and then they will carry out that action plan in the second year. There's a budget available for this. So at the end of the training, it's not the end of their efforts. They develop the action plan at the end of the first year when the training session is going on. And in the second year, they execute with a budget coming from Japan Foundation Asia Center. And so yesterday I came back, the Philippines, after the Philippines and Indonesia tour. And during this trip, I went to Aceh, which tsunami hit 10 years ago. There was a tsunami museum. On the left top, you see we're talking with the victims. And at the time, that lady was a small child. And also last year, we didn't have those people develop program, but we wanted to do it this year, really. So this is Tikal Panda, very famous artist groups created TV program, TV set shape furniture, so that the set, so that people can use it for fun. And so we use this theatrical fixture to express what they learned. And really, I found the quality of the people who gather there. And so by doing this program, we could build a sense of team memberships and the commitment. In the Philippines, this worked very well. On the left top, you see the graduates of last year's program, and they actually executed the action plan they developed in the first year in front of the second year participants. And so that will tell the second year participants what they're going to do. And so at that same evening, they worked on the program development, and then actually the action plan they developed on the same day was so wonderful. I thought that they can be applied right away without any modification. So, and it was very interesting and encouraging to see interaction between the participants of last year's program and this year's programs. There was no seniority kind of difference between the two. They were really getting involved at the same time. And in Aceh, the disaster preparedness is really yet insufficient. So those people are motivated to make some kind of proposal. So the human network and project network is expanding more and more based on our activities. Thank you so much.
ありがとうございました。